Jason Davis, who is the CEO of Simon Data, is going to be speaking with Stephen Mastrocola, who is Director of CRM for SeatGeek. And what they're going to talk about is sort of the relationship that SeatGeek was building with their data engineering team to foster and get better insights in their data so they could drive their business, drive better relationship with customers. We heard this morning Elizabeth talking about, right, being creatively led but data informed. And so the importance of data obviously being very vital. I'm really looking forward to hearing Jason and Stephen. So here they are.
Let's kick off here. It's great to see everyone here. It seems like we're properly mic'd up and ready to go. Stephen, it's great to have you on stage today. Maybe we can just kick off and talk about some of SeatGeek's general marketing goals, touch on personalization, where the business is today, and sort of how your role as head of CRM fits into all that.
Yep. So hey everybody, I'm Stephen Mastrocola. Hopefully you all know and use SeatGeek regularly. If you don't, we are a live event ticketing company where we work closely with a lot of rights holders across the NFL, Major League Baseball, and arenas to power their back box office as well as operate as their sort of resale ticket marketplace. So across that, obviously our goals are selling tickets for all of our clients and driving revenue for both of us. So when you think about live events, it's obviously somewhat complicated in terms of who likes Taylor Swift, who likes the New York Yankees, who goes to a whole slew of football games, and how we really target them and think about that in our messaging. And on my team, on the CRM side, our focus is really around all of our outbound messaging and how we create awareness about events going on sale, about when an event is coming up, when Lionel Messi is signing with Inter Miami and tickets are now available, things of that nature. So very much about creating awareness and powering ticket sales for our clients and our partners.
Great. So, look, we're here today to talk about collaboration between marketing and data teams, how the data flows, from the fingertips of the customer, browsing SeatGeek's app, going into the stadium, watching the Brooklyn Nets or the Yankees, wherever it might be. You gave a few examples of looking at watching Taylor Swift or the Yankees or Messi. Maybe you can talk a bit about personalization, the role data plays within that, and why getting that customer data is so critical to affect some of the use cases that you guys overviewed briefly.
Yeah, for sure. So I think two examples that sort of immediately come to mind is first, when you get a New York Yankees email from SeatGeek, it might seem simple. You live in New York, we sent you a Yankees email, but it's actually way more complicated than that. When we first launched CRM at SeatGeek, we realized one of our fundamental first problems was figuring out who to promote what sports team to. So we started working really closely with our data science team and worked with them on a model where we look at users' interactions across SeatGeek with every single team. And we created a point system where every engagement with a team gets you a certain amount of points. Higher level engagement gets you more points. A lower level engagement gets you fewer points. So for example, if you go onto SeatGeek and you track the New York Mets, we might give you 1,000 points for the New York Mets. If you purchase the New York Knicks, we might give you 500 points for the New York Knicks. If you click on the New York Yankees, we might give you 100 points to the New York Yankees. And at the end of the day, we can sort of add up all those engagements and give each individual user a score for each individual team, which then allows us to say, hey, this is the person's favorite sports team or the favorite baseball team or basketball team, and really drill down there. We can then sort of pipe that through our database and pipe it through platforms like Simon Data, where my team can then go in and say, all right, give me everybody who has a baseball team with a score higher than a basketball team, or give me a baseball team where they're playing in the next 7 days, but their score is above 300 points, because we know that's sort of a cutoff for high engagement, and really target users that way and do it in a way that the user can also influence, right? Then clicking on the email helps raise their score for that team and reinforce that action and give us a reason to have them engage in our platform and do things of that nature. The second example is we recently became the official ticket marketplace of Major League Baseball. And so historically, we were always very focused on getting people to buy tickets on SeatGeek. But one of the interesting angles with baseball is they have many season ticket members. And if you follow baseball, they have 81 home games a year. So people are not going to 81 home games a year. So Major League Baseball is telling them to sell their extra tickets on SeatGeek, which gave us this new user base of very valuable users that we want to really figure out a smart way to message to and provide them some value. So if they're already listing their tickets on SeatGeek, we want to figure out what we could do to make their experience better, help them sell their tickets at a fair price and more quickly. So we sort of worked very closely with our data science team, did some analysis, and they surfaced that there's a cohort of users that were just mispricing their tickets, either too high or too low. Sometimes it was they priced them right to begin with, but now it's 3 weeks later, dynamics for the event have changed, and now they're a little bit out of whack. So our data science team helped come up with a score there that they could use and expose to our team that we were then able to go out and test and say, all right, people with this score, we're going to send them an email saying, you might want to update your listing, your event's only 3 days away. And having a holdout group, being able to see this many people went and actually updated, and this was the impact on whether or not their tickets actually sold or not, and seeing very, very positive returns for there. And we also were able to test across scores where we were able to determine certain scores that actually wasn't even worth us messaging and actually had a negative impact where it was reminding people their tickets hadn't sold and they were getting upset or delisting their tickets, but there was a very much a sweet spot that we've been able to roll out and really help these members price their tickets, update them accordingly, and give them a better overall experience with SeatGeek.
Maybe we can dive into really effective data collaboration between you and your data stakeholders. In a previous life, I was a data scientist. I've run data teams and data science teams, and I'm sure for speaking for folks in the audience, especially folks on the business side of the house, oftentimes you might be looking at the other side of the business and saying things like, "That's cute, that's interesting," but it's not 100% clear, how A and B actually fit together. And how do you, and beyond that, the tools, across both sides of, what you use versus, some of the core data tools, there's a bit of a disconnect there as well. How do you make sure that some of the rich examples you gave, around, customer propensity that's really specific to SeatGeek, how do you make sure that what you have, in your head and the vision that you bring from a CRM function around the strategy and your understanding of the customer, can translate into the right predictive models, the right machine learning, the right data, the right data components that make you successful?
Yeah, I think relationships with the data team is just like any relationship with a coworker, right? It's a two-way street. So it's not just the data team serving up info for my team to use, right? Like there's stuff my team should be doing to help them as well. So me and the head of analytics, we have regular meetings every other week where we sort of each come to the table with certain priorities we think like the CRM team should work on from a data perspective. And we sort of hone in on the ideas we think resonate for both teams and have the biggest opportunity for SeatGeek overall, and really hone in on those aspects. So 2 good examples there as well. I've seen a lot about incrementality at this conference in terms of different sessions. Everybody wants to know how incremental is CRM, how incremental is SEM, how incremental is brand. And one of the cool things about CRM, which is always very interesting to data science people, is that we know exactly who did and did not get a message, right? So there is a way to actually measure true incrementality. So one thing that our data team was very keen on that I supported and we worked together on was conducting a large holdout test last year where we had an nth of our users that we held out of certain CRM programs, and that we held out of all CRM programs, and sort of were able to really measure incrementality that way, where we worked on collaboratively designing the test together, my team then owning the operational execution of it, and the analytics team owning the actual analysis and reporting at the end of the day. And so that was obviously very engaging to our data science team, and we recently got the results, and it worked out very well for them as well because they've been trying to pitch a new attribution model, and the numbers that came back from our incrementality tests exactly matched what would have been in the new attribution model. So it was something that really helped them power and go to the rest of the company and say, hey, we should use this attribution model. We've been doing a holdout for CRM. We know this is exactly the incrementality, and this is exactly how it shows up in the new attribution model, and it was not correct in the old one. So it's sort of a way for them to show added value, them to really dive into the weeds and understand how our programs worked. Another example, and the email is actually up on the screen, is pre-COVID. We had actually if you go back one, but pre-COVID, before times, we had a very effective price drop program where if you...
Oh, it's right, this one, right?
Yeah. Oh, sorry, it changed. Where if you viewed an event and the price dropped afterwards, we'd send you a message letting you know, right? Obviously you're interested in it, now the price dropped. That's a compelling reason to send a message to a user. When COVID hit, probably not surprised to any of you, SeatGeek had to shut everything off. There were no live events to market. As things started coming back on and we were flipping switches to turn on, this email just did not work. No matter what our product team did, it just would not work, it would not send out. At the same time, I was working very closely with one of our analytics engineers on our migration to Simon Data, actually. And he sort of heard about this, and data people love data, right? So they knew how effective this was in the past. and that it was a really big lever for us that we need to have live and should have live. And he realized like, hey, I could service this data for you in Simon Data, just pass literally the raw price drops for every single event and what users viewed them, and then your team can go in and really manipulate that audience. So instead of having this product trigger that went out and said, this person just gets this email without any input, we can choose the events, we can test the events, we can test the thresholds, we promote a 10% price drop versus a 25%, and so on and so forth, and really get it off the ground. And so we had been struggling for about 2 months with the product team to get it set up, but in literally 2 days, this analytics engineer had it live for us, and we were sending out emails because he really understood how our infrastructure worked and knew he could just, sort of get rid of that old thing that was going on and put it in this new setup for us that made it even better than it was in the first place. So I think it's very much about having sort of those open lines of communications, sharing priorities, and making sure you each know how your other systems work.
Great. Let's talk for a few minutes about infrastructure, marketing and data architectures, and really one of the founding principles behind Simon Data when I started the business was just looking at the growing divide between the capabilities around modern data infrastructure, cloud-enabled data across technologies like Amazon Redshift, Google BigQuery, Snowflake and beyond, and then looking at the capabilities and really the API integrations into a lot of marketing tools, and just seeing a disconnect between the two. Maybe you can talk about how you've addressed that gap. We've talked about how you collaborate with the data team, but activating that data, making sure it can flow properly, it's in the right format, normalized properly, clean, real-time accurate in those end systems to do price drop emails and beyond. How have you thought about that? How has your architecture evolved, and where are things today?
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, the way architecture has evolved is Simon Data is reading the data warehouse tables from us, so it's working very closely with our data science team on getting the data in those tables in a way that we can manipulate it. So for example, we have a concert newsletter that goes out on Saturdays where our data team's just exposing the top concerts, and then our team's able to go in and manipulate that in Simon Data and say, these are the top 10 concerts in each city, and sort of send that downstream in sort of an array for our emails to then read from and just display to the user in sort of a very simple way. One of the actually, ironically, the biggest problems that the Simon Data transition solved for us was on the testing front. We could always very easily test, a subject line or copy or things like that, right? When you're sending one user one campaign, another user another campaign, seeing what the click rates or purchase rates were. That was easy. Every system can do that. Where we really struggled was more cohort testing, right? Where we're sending a cohort of X amount of users, these types of messages over a period of time, looking at these users, sending them a different set of messages over a period of time. It was very hard to match those together and look at a user over that period versus just on a campaign by campaign basis. So the way our architecture actually evolved on that side is instead of looking at just straight campaign results, when we send a campaign downstream to our email provider, Simon Data is also publishing a file to AWS that our data team then pulls down and loads into our data warehouse. And it says, these people are in this cohort, and this is what they're getting. And so what we're able to do then is label experiments and things like that in a certain way that our team is able to put a automated testing platform in place where when they see us label something as a specific type of test, it reads those results, publishes it through their whole test analysis, and just gives us the results right then and there in a very readable format where anybody in the company can go in and say, hey, I want to see how our Memorial Day test did, or hey, how did our onboarding test do, or something like that. We're looking at a user over a overall period and seeing how did a specific campaign do, as well as how did it affect users in the next week, 2 weeks, month, and so on, and really look at that user's incrementality piece overall.
And there's one thing you said there that really resonates, and I think when I sort of look at what an ideal workflow looks like, not just around best practices for CRM, but best practices to align marketing expertise and data expertise, it's really thinking about having that unified data layer. And I think one of the things that I think folks don't fully appreciate is it needs to be bidirectional. So with a business like SeatGeek, an omni-channel business, lots of activity happens on the mobile app, but then I go and use my mobile app, I go watch the Brooklyn Nets at Barclays Center, I check in, and there's all sorts of other data around my experience that's outside of mobile, including data science models as well, which has nothing to do with mobile. But the one direction of data flow, which is a bit more obvious, is getting data from your authoritative cloud data stores into your marketing systems. But the other direction, which I think is less understood, but is really just as critical for success, is having that data from your marketing systems seamlessly flow back into your core data systems as well. And having that data represent, the full omni-channel experience. Having that data really represents what's happening, across all customer touch points and not be siloed again, in the way that, so much data is siloed coming in, not having data siloed coming out either, and having a single authoritative view of, of what customers actually did. So a global holdout's a great example where you might run, hey, what's the effectiveness of my broader CRM strategy? Let's run this for a while and see what's happening, and then all the data is in a singular place, and applications like Simon and end channels like Iterable will provide some degree of reporting against this. But again, depending on what you want to do, if you whether it be broader reporting, which is bespoke to to SeatGeek, or going deeper into specific experiments, you're going to want to have that data in a central repository to collaborate with your data team, with your data science team, with your analysts, to have dashboards that thread into other tools. So maybe you can talk for a minute about other data tools you use. I see Looker up here, and how you utilize that in SeatGeek, and how that sits across marketing functions, and maybe also how data teams and other teams use it as well.
Yeah, for sure. So Redshifts, our data warehouse, that sort of just sits in the center of everything. So as you're saying, bi-directional, both Simon and Iterable are bi-directional with our data warehouse, right? We're sending data out as well as sending data back. And then Particle is also then sort of connecting all of those things. But then Looker sort of sits in the top, and that's where we do all of our dashboard reporting. So when I go in and run a CRM campaign, it's really combining everything. So I'm able to look at, yes, how did this MLB email do that was sent out of Iterable, but the teams were chosen by Simon Data, and it can let me see the teams, right? So I can see what was my click rate for someone who got the Mets versus the Yankees, what did they buy, and so on. And we build all of our dashboards off of that. It's also worth noting, we've been able to centralize all of our channels within Simon. So our SEM, paid social, and our brand channels through LiveRamp also send audiences that way. So it's given us this opportunity to look at users holistically. And we've been creating something called value segments, where we look at users as like, this person's a frequent purchaser, this one's a lapsed user, this one's they've never purchased. And we're all talking the same language and using the exact same data, so that when we do run a test, we can isolate people and say, hey, this person's getting SEM and CRM, but not paid social, or vice versa, and sort of speaking the same language and looking at all the data in the same way.
Great. So we have a few minutes left. I'll ask you sort of one more question here. One thing we see across many customers is sort of a Stockholm syndrome. They have a legacy CDP deployment, or they have somewhat complex or inefficient pipelines and workflows from data into their marketing applications. They have a limited view of the customer. Things you might require some CSVs, or might other processes that are overly dependent on IT. But at the same time, you talk to them, and they don't think there's a problem. And I know, Steve, we talked with you for many years before we actually worked together at Simon Data. So you guys came on the other side of this, but maybe you can talk about, especially to folks in the room who are asking, do I need to level up my data strategy? Do I need to rethink my CDP strategy? Do I actually have the right workflows, technology, and processes in place between marketing data teams? What did it look like on the other side? What were some of the symptoms that there was a problem going into this?
Yeah, I mean, it's one of those like something works until it doesn't types of situation, right? Where we were very much in a world where we used to upload CSVs of users to our ESP. So we literally be uploading, I mean, I can literally tell you when you can no longer open an Excel file at 800,000 lines, because that's when like the Excel file breaks. So in terms of how many millions of users you're updating and waiting, right? So when my team's sitting there waiting for users to upload and things of that nature, or download from SQL, it's just an inefficient use of time. And I also think, the one scenario now, we have one campaign that we have not moved over to a new architecture, and it's like currently the bane of my existence. It's sort of a campaign that our product team is triggering, and it's a newsletter, and what we've seen over time is just due to neglect, right? Product teams are getting sidetracked, wanting to work on something else, or other priorities come up. So like sort of having that in your control of when you can trigger something and being able to edit and make it better is hugely powerful. So like we have a newsletter that runs on Mondays that's personalized at the user level. So it gives each user 10 distinct events that it promotes to them. And we started running into an issue in January where we ticket the Cleveland Cavaliers in Cleveland. Cleveland's a market we care about. And Detroit events were showing up a lot in the newsletter. Upon digging into it, it was a scenario where if If you take a plane from Cleveland to Detroit, it's less than 100 miles. If you're driving from Cleveland to Detroit, though, it's like 150 miles. So Detroit was sneaking in to our newsletters because technically, based on a latitude-longitude situation, it looked like it was close enough, but it really wasn't. And there's no way my team could edit that without having like a product team go in, change our code base, and do things like that. So that was sort of also a wake-up call of like, these last few campaigns we have moved to our current architecture, we need to move over because they're a problem, they're causing our clients problems, and they're causing us headaches. So being able to quickly solve and optimize and keep growing, is the biggest thing versus sort of just settling for what's already been going out the door.
Great. And as you were talking, I sort of flashed through a few of the cool campaigns that I've certainly gotten similar from my SeatGeek app and my SeatGeek install on my phone. But we're running out of time here, and I'll just sort of underscore one thing that I've really seen to be the number one driver of success around data-driven marketing, and that's speed and removing friction from workflows. If something is hard, if it requires going to IT, if you can just say, if I could write the code and if I knew where the code was and get to that system deployed, it would take you 5 minutes, but it takes weeks, then I think you have a problem.
For sure.